مساء الخير. Good evening, good night, ladies and gentlemen. I welcome you to the Cairo Climate Talks, very interesting topic about urban agriculture. Before we start, I would like to invite His Excellency Ambassador Lloyd to the podium to give the introductory remarks.
Thank you for the very kind introduction you gave here, and ladies and gentlemen, dear Cairo Climate Talkers, a warm welcome to all of you for the 34th round of the Cairo Climate Talks. For me personally, the third ones, if I count it correctly. And still counting, huh? Tonight we talk about our vision of a greener Cairo, about sustainability through urban agriculture in Egypt's cities. Everybody living in this fascinating megalopolis knows that pollution, traffic congestion, and a lack of green spaces are major issues. Especially the absence of green vegetation is a very popular small topic across all social levels, and many would argue that it is impossible to do anything about it. Of course, it will take more than some rooftop gardens to improve the climate and the quality of living in one of the world's most polluted and largest cities. Looking at urban gardening, however, can be a small and very feasible step forward. Urban agriculture is highly en vogue in German cities, most visibly in Berlin. Walking through the German capital, a number of green rooftops and gardens catch one's eye. Organic veg boxes delivered to the door by farmers from peri-urban areas around the city are a regular addition to many households' grocery shoppings. Several social and intercultural urban agricultural projects allow for collective gardening in public places and on rooftops across the city. Urban agriculture, especially when confronted with such limited space as we have here in Cairo, requires innovative and sustainable solutions for agriculture. Smart irrigation and energy supply systems, stress-resistant crops, and modern greenhouse technologies are pressing issues to be tackled in Egypt. One example is a rooftop farming pilot project in an informal settlement in the south of Cairo, implemented by the German Development Corporation GIZ in the framework of the Participatory Development Program. During the next 2 years, 100 additional rooftop farms are planned in the context of this project. Urban agriculture is indeed a multifaceted topic. Looking at it from an environmentalist perspective, green spaces help mitigate pollution. Planted rooftops contribute to the cooling of buildings and consequently reduce the need for highly energy-consuming air conditioning. In addition, urban agriculture has an important social dimension. Raising animals and growing food in restricted urban areas helps those who experience difficulties tapping into the formal food system to meet their daily food requirements. For those who are better off, it might serve an educational purpose. City dwellers around the world, I count my children among them, have often lost the link to origin and production of the products they consume on a daily basis. Lastly, creating green spaces in a megalopolis like Cairo can contribute to a more attractive cityscape and increase the quality of living for its residents. The collaboration of policymakers, academics, and entrepreneurs is essential in the process of developing innovative solutions for sustainable urban planning. Public panel discussions like ours today offer an opportunity to bring these different stakeholders together while raising public awareness at the same time. As part of this event, Cairo Climate Talks has launched a competition asking for people's vision of a greener Cairo. The participants were asked to tell us how our city and the lives of its inhabitants can be improved in a sustainable way. The results were impressive. We received a number of very creative contributions, taking the forms of scientific papers, photographs, and even some videos. Some of the submissions presented broader concepts of how to design a smart city or a smart building from the scratch. This could be interesting to discuss once plans about the new capital Cairo get closer to implementation. We also received very practical ideas of how to make Cairo a greener city. For instance, by transforming fallow areas into public parks with walking trails, or by applying creative irrigation solutions that reuse wastewater from mosques and AC condensation. Ladies and gentlemen, let me now announce the winner of the Greener Cairo competition, and by that, of the customized CCT bike. Among the many valuable contributions, we have chosen the EAT initiative handed in by, and the winner is Monica Michel. Congratulations. This ongoing project by students of Cairo University has caught our particular attention. Recycling materials such as plastic bottles and car wheels, as well as organic fertilizer made from biological waste, are used to turn rooftops in less privileged areas into places for social gatherings. This contribution therefore combines sustainability aspects with social aspects and might hopefully serve as a model for future projects of this kind. For you, my heartfelt congratulations.
Thank you.
We think that this bike, as a symbol of climate-friendly transport, embodies well the next steps towards making Cairo a greener city. I wish you a happy journey.
Thank you.
All the best.
Your Excellency, thank you very much for this excellent introduction. You took most of the words from me. So I'm happy to announce that we are going to see a short movie about urban agriculture. It has been prepared by our colleague Lindsay. It's about 6 minutes long, and after that we are going to move to another interesting topic, some Q&As. But before going to that, I will leave you with the movie. Thank you.
The idea came to us in 2010. We were volunteering on an aquaponic farm, and then we thought, okay, this could work in any environment. It doesn't really need any agricultural land. There's like lots of empty rooftops in Cairo, and lots of people who might be willing to make some extra money. So we thought, okay, that'd be a really good combination to try to do it on rooftops. We have 3 different types of products that we offer. One is rooftop gardens, which is basically just ornamental gardens. It's about creating a green space in your home. A roof garden is a perfect place to create a new getaway for yourself. The other one are wall gardens. There you can grow different types of ornamental plants, and it's also for decorative purposes, for heat insulation purposes. The third product that we offer are roof farms, and this we do in underprivileged areas where we work closely with communities on growing vegetables and growing different types of crops and herbs. We also help them grow the plants, so we have like quality control, we give them training, and we also buy the produce from them and try to resell it. For low-income areas, we use, of course, lower technology products that are more affordable. Smaller functional urban garden could start from, in the informal areas, 2,000 to 3,000 pounds. To maintain a garden of 12 square meters takes around half an hour a day. We use a material that's made out of recycled PET bottles to hold the plants together, and it's based on hydroponic principles. So we use very lightweight materials with no soil, almost no soil, and we create like the perfect environment for plants to grow vertically. The idea is that you also create an insulation layer, so the plants, they absorb all the heat from the day. So if this is on the facade of a building, you'd notice a drop in the heat. We also try to select plants that will withstand this kind of environment of growing vertically, smaller shrubs and things that will not require a lot of maintenance on a day-to-day basis. The entire system is automatically irrigated, so we have drip irrigation lines going throughout the system. We're trying to develop a smart irrigation system that's really based on the plant's needs instead of being just based on a specific time of the day. We want to measure the moisture which plants need at any given moment and then give it the water that it really requires instead of just giving too much water. We've had lots of NGOs and donor agencies willing to work with us. We've trained more than 200 people on rooftop farming. We've installed more than 60 rooftop farms in underprivileged areas and also probably the same amount in let's say, upscale neighborhoods. I think it's a growing trend.
أول المشروع كان من عن طريق GIZ، إنما بعد مع الاتفاق شركة شادو. المشروع كان ذو 3 أهداف. الهدف الأول اللي هو المنظر الجمالي، الهدف الثاني اللي هو إن أنا أكل حاجات خضروات ورقية بدون مبيدات. الهدف الثالث إن هو كان استثماري. فهم اختاروا أول حاجة جربوها كان الجرجير فقط لا غير، لكن بعدها ابتدوا بالملوخية. بس أنا حاسة إن الجرجير مش من الحاجات اللي هي ما فيهاش استثماري وفي نفس الوقت ضعيفة. ففي ناس قالوا في مخدرات بتتزرع على الأسطح، فقلت يا جماعة طب احنا هنوزع، يعني اللي عايز. كنت في اللحظة دي أنا كنت زرعة جرجير وزرعة نعناع، فطبعا ما كنتش برد على الناس خالص. كل اللي أنا عملته إن أنا أخدت من المحصول ووزعت على الجيران. ده المخدرات اللي أنا زرعها عندي على السطح، اتفضلوا. فشافوها فما بقوش متخيلين إنه في زراعة على الأسطح. حتى جيراني تحت اهو برضه ابتدوا يزرعوا. ناس كتير برضه طلبت ووديت لهم من شركة شادو في GIZ على الأسطح كتيرة جدا، برضه تم زراعة كتيرة. شقة تحت هنا الشمس نازلة عليها مباشرة، فما كانش حد بيطيق يقعد فيها. الجو بتاعها إلى حد ما أفضل من الأول بكتير. لا، هي أول ما اشتغلت ما درتش ربح على طول، فكانت حوض بينجح والتاني بيفشل. يعني خدنا فترة كبيرة، مرة نقول البذرة، يعني مرة كانت شركة شادو تقول مرة البذرة، نرجع تاني نقول لا ده حرارة الجو. بنجرب حاجات. خدت يعني تقريبا أكتر من 6 شهور. أنا حابة أكمل لأن أنا حابة المشروع كمشروع نفسه، بزراعة حاجات أغلى، وكمان بإيه يعني بدراسة الحاجة قبل زراعتها. إن أنا أدرس الحاجة كويس جدا عشان أبقى عارفة مشاكلها قبل ما أبدأ فيها. لا، أنا كنت أشوف الزرع قدام مني ومعجبة بيه بس، لكن مش بنزرع. إنما هنا أنا زرعت بإيدي وحسيت إن أنا بربي طفل صغير كابني وماشية معاه خطوة بخطوة وشايفة مشاكله وشايفة معاناته وشايفة النمو بتاعه.
Brief but interesting movie, I suppose. It shows very much what could be done in Egypt and mainly in Cairo. And this is going to be our topic now, the urban agriculture impact on Egypt and how the various interested parties are working with that. For that, we have a panel discussion. We have 5 distinguished guests whom I'm going to introduce and ask each one of them to come here on the stage. Mr. Carl Philip Shook. Mr. Shook, I think you have been for some time in Cairo now and work with the GIZ, so you are experienced in Cairo Matters regarding this issue. Sharif Hosni, whom you have seen in the movie, he is the CEO of Shadoof. In my opinion, Sharif is one of the main pioneers trying to enforce this particular issue. Professor Osama al-Bahiri. Professor al-Bahiri has been involved in urban agriculture since 1991. We had a brief discussion earlier this morning, and I Googled him as well, so very prominent personality. Emily Matheisen. Emily comes from or works for Habitat International Coalition. She is, I guess you just told me, you have been in Cairo now for over 5 years and seen all the various discourses, political and non-political. And Dr. Martin Buchholz. Dr. Martin works with the University TU of Berlin, Technische Universität Berlin. Parallel to that, I guess you own your own company, which is also heavily involved in this particular domain. The order of the process is now that around 40 to 45 minutes, we will be asking questions here on the panel. And after that, each of you will have the chance to ask his own question. Our colleagues will pass through you, and there is a yellow piece of paper, a noted paper in your files. Please write your questions on that. And we will then list, or we will select some of the questions and try to answer them. I'll move to the first question. It's to you, Emily. We had discussed it outside right now. Since you are focusing on urban planning and food policy, if there was one local policy recommendation that you would make, what is this policy recommendation, and what would its biggest impact be on most of the Egyptian municipalities?
Okay, is it working? Yeah? Okay, well, I don't know if I can just choose one, because I think there's a lot of interrelated policy bases that need to be there to have real change on a food system, because a lot of my work focuses not just on urban agriculture, but how can we make city food systems, so looking at the city, the green belt around the city, and even the rural areas, maybe sort of in a reasonable distance from a city, work better to connect producers and consumers, to have better local economy, to have stronger local businesses and small and medium-sized enterprises. And I think that in order to connect all of these actors together, I think that it's absolutely critical to have a base of participatory policy making, but actual full and meaningful participation of all of the relevant actors in developing policies for food and other things. So I think it's not just Egypt, it's just general. But I think that once this sort of culture of policy making is created, you have so much potential for transformative change, not just in food, but in particular food, because food crosses issues of transportation, of land use, of nutrition and health, of so many different sectors. But I would also say, and this is something that came up this morning, and I think it's really important, that in order to, on a municipal and a national level, I think that reforming tenure arrangements in Egypt and then having better access to tenure for specifically small-scale and peasant farmers, whether they be in a rural or in a peri-urban area, is absolutely critical to having stronger urban food policies. And also tenure for housing, because when we talk about rooftop gardens, if you do not have tenure to your house, which many people in informal settlements suffer from, there is no reality to actually talk about a rooftop garden if you don't have ownership or access to these spaces.
The second question will go to Carl. The urban agriculture is often viewed as environmentally friendly, without any negative inputs. This is the general perception of it. In your opinion, what is the other side of urban agriculture? We had touched on that slightly earlier this morning.
You mean the negative implications?
More or less, yes.
Well, we discussed this morning in a workshop the implications for water use. Like, is it justified that the state subsidies which go into the purification of drinking water are then used for urban agriculture? I see it a little bit different. We discussed it also. Like, first of all, the water is, I think, wasted in other practices much more than on, for example, the rooftop farming project that we have initiated. Also, if you look into the numbers and the facts and figures, then you find that the purified drinking water, actually only 10% is actually used for drinking in these informal settlements. I'm only talking about the informal settlements here. Imagine how it might be even different or worse in like wealthier districts of the city. So 10% is used for drinking. About a third is used for the kitchen. 25% of the water is actually used for flushing the toilet. So I think the kitchen and the toilet is mainly some areas where we can work on improving the water use. Saving technologies can maybe be introduced there. But the water that is used for the urban agriculture, I personally don't see that this is the major risk to the water resources in Egypt.
Thank you, Carl. Sharif, the third question will go to you. Your company is providing the complete value cycle from the introduction of the solution to the particular tenant till the sale of the produce in the market. In your opinion, what's the impact on the prices, the logistics, and also the competition in a particular environment, whether these are in the economically deprived zones or the economically better doing zones?
Okay, that's a complicated question. But I think first of all, let's say the scale that we're operating on is probably too small to have an impact on the entire market. But what we try to do is maybe have an impact on the smaller level, which means that it would have an impact on the families growing the crops, increasing their income by small margins. It's not really about creating an additional or having a full-time job growing crops on the rooftop. It's more about creating an additional income for these families working on their own rooftops. In terms of maybe areas where we could have an impact is on the marketing side, because we try to produce pesticide-free crops, and that's already a small market. So we try to take a small segment from that market, which is really the organic and pesticide-free market. I don't know if that answers the question. Or
it answers partially.
Partially.
In my opinion, I think we are going to see an enhanced market competition. Maybe prices are going to come down and the quality of the produce is going to enhance, because from the movie you can see that the actual quality of the produce is higher than the quality being produced on a commercial scale. Dr. Osama, we have just mentioned you have been around in this type of activity since over 20 years. In your view, what is the lookout for the next 10 years for urban agriculture in Egypt in particular? What do you expect to happen for urban agriculture in Egypt?
Thank you very much. Actually, when we starting in 2000, it was, for the people, we thought the people will not refuse it. But suddenly we find the people is attracted. And at the beginning we was working with FAO, and we are supposed to do 10 training courses. And each course have about 40. And when we end about 15 course, and each course was about 50. And it was waiting list about 100. And they planning us, why we don't give us, etc. Actually, when we started, we finished the project, and then the idea is coming up and down, up and down. And when we get the revolution in 2011, and we thought it is dead. But after the situation is back again, we discover the idea back again, and back very quickly. And now, if we are not speaking about the next 10 years, we're speaking now, Now we are hitting all the Upper Egypt, from Giza to Aswan. You know, we have a work with FAO. We are introducing training and make some pilot projects and attract people. We started last year with Qina, and it was the first time for us to go to Upper Egypt, and with very, very, very poor areas. And I thought the people will refuse it because they have agricultural land. But I discovered the opposite. The ladies is very clever. They're asking a lot of questions, and very specific questions, which is actually didn't find here in Cairo. And they attracted, and then we've done, and we success. The only thing was difficult in Upper Egypt is the very high temperature at summer. But we discover in some vegetable it can resist. The one is very good one is aubergine. Aubergine was perfect, and the people like it there. Tomato, it can be in winter and in spring. And I think within this next 10 years, it will distribute it very rapidly because the people attracted. Also, the newspapers and the TV programs, etc., they attracted. They are following us. They are asking us, and then the idea is increased. And when we start in 2000, nobody know it. Now we have the German embassy. We have a lot of projects. We have a lot of NGOs is speaking about it. That means we are success.
Thank you, Dr. Dr. Osama. It seems that the Egyptian females are again the main drivers in this type of approach. I believe that maybe we should focus more on Egyptian women, mainly in the economically deprived zones, because there are so many statistics confirming that females are actually the main drivers economically and socially.
Actually, we are concentrating with women and children. We are concentrating with women and children because actually we have the, other vision. Our vision, and this is make us continue for these things, depend on us, not other things. If we have children eating a clean vegetable without pesticides, and it's fresh, and they are smelling a good oxygen, their health will be different after 20 years. Then in my vision, it can be a national project to improve the health and mentality of the Egyptian. And we have to start with the children, not only with the useful.
Maybe I would like to confirm this from our project that the women were the drivers. As we have seen in the movie, and I'm very glad about this movie. I'm so happy that this movie was done because it showed like the cooperation in this small pilot project in Esbet El Nasser in the Basatin district, and the lady we have just seen, like she was from the beginning so emotional, but in the very beginning extremely unsuccessful. Like all her crops failed for the first 3-4 months. Maybe you remember this, Sherif. So, but she didn't give up. Like she continued believing in this and trying everything, troubleshooting, asking questions, everything. So without her commitment to this, she would have dropped out earlier, for sure. And we had some men in the project who dropped out earlier, so they gave up.
I can vouch for that. So, Dr. Buchholz, the next question goes to you. As an engineer, and from the point of view as an engineer, as well as your experience in your own company, what are the main technological advantages of urban agriculture? What is the impact of the direct and indirect inventions, etc.?
Okay. Well, as we saw in the movie, we cannot talk about urban agriculture as a movement, but it's on the seed level. But technically speaking, it's also at the seed level. So we just are starting to do something. But the potential is really impressive. So we can continue the technology towards a higher symbiosis between the building and the garden. That means, for example, using the grey water from the building, so not from the toilets, but from the other water sources, to irrigate. We can also transfer our biological waste by composting, also by carbonization, it's kind of combustion system to create substrates. The idea is also to always create some more than you need, so that you can give it to the next house, so that it's a growing system. That's also very important. Then what we do research on is the idea of using greenhouses. So not just the greenhouse as we know it from the field, but a greenhouse which can recycle the water which the crops are evaporating. So we are condensing water. So we close the water cycle and can give back water to the building. That would be a completely change of the idea of the building. A third level could be that we also integrate climate control strategy. So the cooling, the air conditioning is connected to the greenhouse in a way that we use evaporators, which evaporate water and by this generate cool for the building. But the water which goes out of these evaporators we can provide to the greenhouse again and finally close also the air cycle. And by this we come to a very productive system. For example, in this room we produce so many CO2 actually that the level is up to 2000 ppm, which is 4 or 5 times more, but the crops will like it. They will grow faster. But we also will like maybe the air coming back because it has a higher quality than the polluted air outside. So, no? So these are only a few ideas we can get when we go ahead with this subject on a technological level. Well, thanks.
Does this mean that we can expect new technologies to pop up in the coming years, new architectural concepts, electronics, IT systems governing this particular issue?
Yeah. From the architecture, I would say think about the greenhouse as something, another layer we put over a building, and for the daytime we use it as a solar collector, collecting energy, but in the nighttime we use it as a thin layer which rejects heat, which we collected through the day, and providing cool for the next day. And by this, the shape will change. In this afternoon, I used my time to visit Cairo University, some colleagues which do research together with me, and we visited a roof in which we could place a greenhouse and at the same time provide climate control to one of their buildings, part of their buildings. And we have the place, we have the ideas. Now we look for the money. What about DAAD? Okay.
Maybe these ideas could be a good concept to convince the government and the Ministry of Energy and Electricity to give a support, because in the end we all know that Egypt suffers of energy shortages, and it's my personal belief that this type of concept could contribute substantially to reducing the energy. I took a peek at your presentation earlier today. You were talking about 20 to 25% energy reduction if such a complex system is applied.
Yes, we can even go beyond, I think.
Oh. All right. Sharif, the next question goes to you. It's about the practitioners and the municipalities. The question goes like this: how can city municipalities and practitioners work together to make urban agriculture affordable? In my opinion, it's again an economic issue. How can practitioners afford the cost of access to fresh water? Listening to Dr. Buchholz, it's quite complex to have a technology recycling water. And as we know, the government is planning to increase the price of water as we go in the next years. This is not a concept for 2 or 3 years, but it's a concept for the future. So water definitely is going to become more expensive. How would you respond to such a question?
Again, a very easy question. So I think, of course, you're absolutely right about the scarcity of water and the need to look into technologies that save water, and also in your case, maybe harvest water from plant evaporation, which is something probably no one has thought about, or it's the first time that I hear about it was today in the morning, which was very impressive, to be honest. But there are also other things where we can reuse the water, specifically when we talk about grey water. For anyone who's not an expert, grey water is just water that's been slightly contaminated with soap coming from the sink, and so not really black water that contains sewage. So that could be, of course, integrated into urban planning, that people would have this kind of requirement to have a grey water recycling system. I believe that in Australia this is already a requirement for anyone who has a lawn in some cities, that they have to use grey water or this kind of recycled water to irrigate their lawn. Let's say hydroponics, which is a technology we're focused on a lot, gives the possibility to recycle water, specifically runoff water, which plants do not use. So you can reuse that several times over and over. And that saves around 80% of the water compared to traditional agriculture. So I think, again, technology is, of course, a very, very important factor. Infrastructure in terms of grey water usage. But when we talk about municipalities, I think there's more that they can provide. And one thing that they can provide is space. I think there are many examples in Berlin, as you had mentioned earlier. The Königsgarten, it's a project which was an abandoned land. People took it over, started growing crops on that land, and now it's become almost like a park for people to come and enjoy some music, concerts, etc. And at the same time, they're growing different crops in that area. So I think in terms of municipality, there's a lot that they can offer in terms of space, in terms of legislation. And of course, once real water scarcity issues become apparent to the individual living in Cairo, it will be more important for them to think about how they're using their water. But maybe as long as water is subsidized at very high rates, it won't be a compelling issue for the individual who doesn't really feel the effects of the water scarcity.
Thank you. But wouldn't subsidized water blur the final cost of the produce in the market and have some negative side effects as we go?
To be honest, I think that's a big question. You can't just say that it's better to cut subsidies on water. It's also important that people start to recognize the real value of water. I think we waste a lot of water in many different things, in cleaning cars in very inefficient ways. Sorry to say this to any golf lover, but we have an excess of golf fields in Cairo with probably only less than, I don't know, 500 players in all of Egypt. So there's really a lot of inefficiencies in water usage, and part of that is because water is for free. And what would people do if they don't have that cheap water? People who can't afford to pay the true price of water? I think that's a bigger question for people who are in politics, not me. And maybe you want to say something about that. No, okay.
Okay. Emily is going to answer a strategic question with a slight element of politics. How can urban agriculture be better incorporated into city plans? This was a major topic earlier this morning.
Well, in my opinion, I think it's already incorporated into the actual physical structure of most spaces. It's how do you preserve it and how do you create an enabling policy environment to ensure that it can continue and can be supported, that it can thrive, that it can be beneficial for both the producer itself and consumers, and not something that's necessarily taken over by very, very large companies. But in some cities which are trying to actually plan for food systems, because I think this is a difference also between between the global north and the global south. Because many cities in the global south, the urban food systems, urban agriculture are already existing already. And there's these very interesting networks of informal economy that are existing already. And so it's how can maybe you just not intervene and let the things continue to thrive and these relationships continue to be there. But in other cities where this becomes a bit more complicated, I think that it's who is making the policies is, and again, another question, because if it's the producers and the consumers themselves, specifically the small scale food producers that are making the policies, whether it be in rural or peri-urban areas, I think that completely changed the character of the policy, and changes the character of the urban plan itself. And so then, I guess, third, very quickly, that when we're discussing an urban plan, reconceptualizing what is urban is absolutely critical, because the urban doesn't necessarily stop at the city border, but we have to better understand how these relationships in the flows of people and goods and services and many things are moving between places, that we can't be so stuck in this idea.
Thank you. Dr. Osama, we have been talking about rooftops. However, I believe urban agriculture also includes gardens and includes, I think, on the soil, yani, substitute, yes. What is being done for the soil remediation? We know that in Cairo, the soil is extremely toxic in a lot of areas. Are there any programs to remove soil toxicity by using very special plants prior to releasing this particular plot of land for urban agriculture?
Speak about urban agriculture is on the top, or you speak about
normal urban soil? Agriculture on a normal ground.
Actually, to be honest, it is too difficult, but it can be used some special plants by using bioremediation. That's to take some heavy metals from the soil, but it needs a lot of work. You know, it's not easy. You have to stay. I think Europe until now suffered from DDT until now. You know, it's more than 30 or 40 years to take when you are using heavy pesticides and fungicides and everything. It's not easy to take off the toxic substance from the soil.
So it's very difficult. You would consider moving to the heights?
We can use the soil culture even, but not using the soil. Yeah. You can use substrate culture, you can use water culture, hydroponics, aeroponics. This is all far from the soil. If you want to have something, this is easier than to take off the toxic substance from the soil.
Actually, my question was whether there are any plans in order to enhance the health conditions of the Cairenes by implementing urban agriculture. However, since you said it's very difficult, so it's going to be taking some time to... Dr. Buchholz, we have talked about this particular question when we're sitting outside. Is there a way to map existing resources in individual cities? Is there a technological way, a technical way?
Well, I would say one factor is water again. We have maybe regions where we have, for example, seawater as a new resource. Could be used in the evaporative cooling to generate cool, but at the same time being combined in a way that we also use or condense this water and gain it. Once this problem is tackled, the whole coastal areas could be prepared in a way that they can be further urbanized, as there is always a unlimited water source in the surrounding, and this could be This could happen around the existing cities on the coast, I would say, like Alexandria or Hurghada or so. The other thing is further economizing water. I was already talking about this. This is, for example, the Cairo area. If talking about this concept of condensing water, also the saline water of the brackish water, which you can find around the Nile areas, could be further exploited, as it is. It can be diluted with the condensed water, and by this the salinity goes down. So there are different options of using or exploiting new water sources through the greenhouse technology. I would say the urban aspect of this is very important, because always we not only have to think about the water as a resource for growing crops, but also the nutrients. So today the nutrients comes out of the factory. The nitrogen is produced by, let's say, a chemical process using electricity. The phosphorus is just harvested from some places in Morocco, or some in the potassium, third main fertilizer, also mainly comes from fossil sources, or is generated from seawater, like in Jordan, for example. But in the future, these particles, as these sources are not so renewable, some of them are even more restricted than the water or the oil, like the phosphorus. The other alternative for this is just using the wastewater from the urban settlements. So from this point of view, urban horticulture has a very strong impact in the future. Yeah.
Thank you. I think the next question goes to you, Carl. As it's currently obvious, most urban agriculture projects are grant financed. How do urban farms promote sustainability after the life of the grant? What happens to those particular projects? Do they survive or die out?
Well, the model that we introduced to Asbet El Nasser was a business model in cooperation with Shadouf. So residents earned money from selling their food to Shadouf. And of course, we have explained to them that they have to make their own savings in the future in order to replace rotten or broken materials. If this actually happens, I can't tell you. It depends on the vision or the belief in this project by the individual, the resident. Yes, it's true that in order to kick off, we have subsidized the equipment heavily. We have only expected a very small portion to be borne by the residents themselves. I think this is necessary in the beginning, yeah, and this is why international cooperation is here, yeah, and why it is providing some funds. But what we also want to do, of course, is we want to create a kind of a social movement behind it. Like only if the people start to create a social movement behind it, then they are willing and perhaps also able to put some money aside in order to reinvest into this kind of approach. And of course, it's extremely important that we keep the costs very low. So I am very interested in the technologies that are coming up for water reuse and so on. But of course, we cannot go to the people and give them the most advanced technology in the beginning, because it will just cost too much for them to maintain it. So I think for the moment we have found a quite low-cost model, which I think is able to for self-sustaining.
Thank you. Sounds quite interesting. Thank you. The next question goes to Sharif and Dr. Osama. So, are there any urban agriculture projects in Egypt or Cairo in specific that are in partnership with rural farms? For instance, a rural farm with an urban outpost or vice versa.
I think I can think of one project, which is Nawaya. They work with the farmers that are very close to Cairo, and they also build, or let's say we had a small project with them to have a rooftop farm in the training center. So that's this kind of like an in-between project between rural and urban farming. That's the one project that I know of.
Other project is Nida in Qina, and this actually is working in the rural area and in the city itself, and it is working through UN project, and also there is some areas, but it is scattered. It's not a big project through the NGOs in some rural areas.
Thank you. I think in short we are going to move to the audience questions. I have one last question to Emily here, nevertheless, from your international experience. You need 10 minutes? Okay. Okay. My boss gave me 10 minutes, so. How did other countries and cities handle the liabilities issue? By liabilities, I mean financial liabilities, social liabilities, in some instances also regulatory liabilities. And what are some of the best practices for urban agriculture?
Well, I guess if you mean how do countries handle the liabilities, I think if you're asking me how do the governments support or not support the financial cost of the urban agriculture, is that what you're asking?
Not necessarily the governments, the authorities. It's not a politically oriented question here.
Okay. Oh, no, I'm asking.
Regulatory oriented question more. I know that in Egypt you missed some regulatory aspects. The regulatory framework for urban agriculture has not been set to date. There is no discussion about it. Nevertheless, observing what's happening in Cairo, I personally recognize that there might be some social liabilities, some financial liabilities which we have touched upon. But last but not least, my opinion, the most important thing, my opinion, is the regulatory framework. You talked about Nairobi earlier this morning when they introduced regulatory frameworks and how this enhanced the whole urban agricultural process. So how do these liabilities affect urban agriculture, and how do various cities, from your personal experience, handle those liabilities issues?
Well, I think with Nairobi, it wasn't a regulatory framework, it was an enabling policy environment. In fact, before, there was a huge problem with most residents, especially in informal areas and other low-income areas, to have urban gardens or home gardens, which were actually in Nairobi quite critical to household food security, to keep animals, and it was in a way sort of criminalized. And people were fined, and it was sort of, you were having to break the law to do something that you needed for your basic needs. And so to access your rights in that community was almost impossible. But now the civil society really pushed the government to enact a new policy on urban and peri-urban food in Nairobi, and now you have a complete, I wouldn't say complete transformation overnight, but you have the beginnings of something very interesting where the government isn't necessarily regulating anything. They've just changed, I would say in a way it's the zoning or the ability to do things legally. And so you have many different NGOs working with at-risk youth, with female-headed households on having small livestock, having small home gardens, which are actually very productive. And it's not like Cairo because you don't have this rooftop space, so they're actually working with vertical farms and different sort of constructions. You have this interesting movement of some of the Maasai pastoralists outside of the city coming into the city to use the green spaces to graze their animals because there's a lack of space even in some of the peri-urban and rural areas. You have arrangements with these wealthier houses that have these lawns that they're using the grass clippings to feed the animals. And so what happened is the beginnings of a new dialogue among maybe sectors of society that weren't talking to each other and sort of looking at the way communities interact with each other and how they can benefit from each other. But I think that, I mean, you have other cities which have really taken a quite amazing approach in urban agriculture, like Rosario in Argentina, where the local government has really taken a leading role in not only making an enabling policy environment, but really supporting people to create, to have urban agriculture specifically within the city. But I think the other cities which have some of the, in my opinion, the most interesting urban agriculture and urban food systems are those cities that have let civil society sort of act by themselves and do what really is, I think communities really do know what's best for themselves in the end, and that they're able to meet their needs if given the opportunity to interact with each other and support one another. So you have very interesting things happening in Toronto, in Milan, in Medellin, in even Dakar, in some other various cities, and I think that that's really the best way to deal with what we might call liabilities is not regulation, because in Cairo we can't really discuss any policy for urban agriculture. I don't think that is even a useful discussion right now, because agriculture policy is kind of a disaster right now. And I mean, there's nobody will argue that, whether you're in the government or you're working with civil society or in a business. And until these core issues are solved with how we deal with agriculture, how we deal with urban planning, how we deal with health, I mean, we have to take a different approach. So it would be, I was discussing with a friend earlier, to create an urban agriculture policy in Cairo would be like building a house without a foundation. So it doesn't make any sense, and it would crumble quite quickly, I think.
Thank you. We'll move now to the question from the audience.
Can I just add one part to this?
Yes, please, go ahead.
I doubt that many European or like countries have an urban agriculture policy in place, but cities might actually encourage citizens to do something about it, and that is the real problem here in Cairo and in Egypt. And I mean, let's face it. If I talk to the local district or the governorate, yes, maybe they like my they like the project, the urban agriculture project, but can they issue a policy? Of course they can't. So, and I don't expect from the national level that they bother themselves with an urban agriculture policies. I mean, there are other priorities in this country on the national level, quite for sure. However, like, it would be wishful to see the local authorities being able to address this approach by issuing policies or creating enabling frameworks and so on. But this is, of course, not possible at the moment.
Okay, thank you. We'll move to the questions of the audience. Some very interesting questions. However, we will not be able to go through all of them, so we are going to try to answer it in a way so that all questions have been answered more or less. I guess the first question will go to you, Dr. Osama. It's quite interesting question about the green roof program announced by the Egyptian government earlier this year. What about the green roof program? I heard about it, but there is nothing which I have seen so far. Does this fit into what Carl and Emily are saying, or is there hope?
Me too, I heard also, but I didn't find anything. Actually, we are working depending on ourselves. A lot of things that are written in the newspaper, but there is nothing actually, to be honest. I'm sorry for that.
I guess this is a question again to Sharif, but this is about the high-end part of the society, the top 10%. How to address the private villas, owners of gardens, to incorporate urban agriculture in their landscape. Do you have any ideas on that?
Well, I think we can't force anyone to have a, let's say, a urban agriculture plot on their farm. But I think there is a growing interest in that. So we get a lot of requests from people saying we want to have our own, let's say, rooftop garden just for growing our own crops or our own vegetables, herbs, etc. So there is a growing trend, a growing interest. We can't influence the individual. We try to raise awareness. We come to events like this just to try to increase the awareness and tell people that it is possible and it does work. And if you are interested, you can do it.
Dr. Buchholz, this is specifically for you.
Maybe so. I can add just one. Can I add one part to that?
You want to go? Continue.
Yeah,
go ahead.
We also talked to some, let's say, bigger real estate developers on incorporating these kind of ideas in their initial planning, so they can offer that to people who want to buy a property in their development as an option.
Excellent. Thank you. This is directly to you. What are the most important technologies now available in terms of water treatment in Germany for urban agriculture?
Well, on the one hand, we have the biological systems that use bacteria to reduce harmful parts of the wastewater. We here on the in the morning we totally agreed that we cannot use water from toilets, for example, to feed urban agriculture but the grey water could be tackled. For that, on the other hand, we don't need the most recent and the most high-tech like treatment methods. So this can be imagined as a box where we have a moving part which brings oxygen to the water, and this needs a little electric motor and nothing else. I would say this is the way to go. We saw in the film the little pump, though it's treated well. It's not more complicated, I would say. But we need additional piping, etc., additional collector. This is all, in the end, this is all low tech, but it needs a bit personal care that it's handled right. When talking about what I was talking about, going to the condensed water approach, we also look that this remains in a level that can be treated by normal people. So these are devices where water or other liquids are pumped up and fall down. They are collected. There's nothing magic behind it. So,
thank you. I have an interesting comment from the audience. I guess Dr. Osama will have to address this comment. If you are not going to fix and solve contaminated soil and just take the easy way through urban agriculture, then we will not have an effective way for a sustainable development. Do you agree to that, or do you have a comment on that?
Actually, I didn't skip to urban agriculture. I speak about soil culture. Soil culture, it is in the field and in big areas, and I think most of Europe now is using this system, and we are going now in the program of the president. We start about 1,000 greenhouses to produce using soil culture. This is to save water in the desert and also to use the uncultivated areas, which is actually instead of I spend money for reclaim the soil, I using for producing, and you can get within 1 month you start to produce, and then you can take money from this and reclaim the soil. I didn't say we are going to ignore the soil, but we can use or produce vegetable, which is consume a lot of water, with a few water, and then we can let the soil for wheat and maize, etc., which is not easy to produce it in hydroponics.
Maybe I could also add some to this. So I like the idea of reclaiming this bad soils using crops. Of course, this cannot be eatable crops, so forget about this. But we can still think of following the way of urban horticulture, that personal groups of families or looking for an additional income take care of these areas. And they produce, for example, fiber crops like kenaf, jute, or linen, to produce some hardware stuff, to produce textiles, for example, or growing bamboo, and to use it as a kind of informal construction material. Also, I can imagine business cases like this. And these crops are very fast-growing crops, and they are, by that, also have show the possibility to take up a lot of heavy metals or other materials. And I think this is possible, but this means that these people have to take care about these crops. They have to irrigate, they have to give nutrients. But I think this is the way to go. So I give the right to this person who asked the question.
I will pass the mic to Anna. You have a mic. Go ahead, please.
I'm ready.
Yeah.
No, I think this question is absolutely critical, and it comes back to something you asked me earlier about urban plans. So why is this question, especially with peri-urban and even the rural areas, for example, just not so far outside of Cairo, I would even say maybe even to places like Beni Suef and other areas, how come these are not part of the larger urban plan of Cairo? How come we're not discussing the effects of soil and how we can incorporate soil regeneration and agroecology, for that matter, into the way that we produced food? But I also think it's quite dangerous to have a discussion about removing, changing the whole modality of crop use, because people are using that land and they're using it for a purpose, and whether it be their personal household food security, or they're using it to contribute to the global or local food system. I think that this question in almost in taking it too much from a business lens can be really dangerous, and quickly commodifies nature in a way that is well, it's dangerous. It's very dangerous. And the same question came up with water, and the same question came up with these issues. So things have a cost, but they don't necessarily have a price, and I think that's very important to keep in our minds.
This is a dilemma, I guess.
It's not a dilemma. It's just it's a reality that we just can't necessarily tackle the issue just like this. Exactly. But I think that when we're discussing urban planning, that it has to go much farther than the limit of the city, because that's actually the reality of where the effects are happening and the needs of the communities living inside the city.
How about implementing concepts like in Germany, Scherbergärten? These are the small plots of land which they are leasing out to various individuals, which they can cater for either as a garden. Maybe, Carl, you can elaborate on that. Because I heard that some people in 6th of October and Tagamma, and so they are planning to do this particular approach. Still very far away, but they are talking about it.
I mean, the so-called Schrebergärten in Germany, they have a particular history, which I'm not exactly familiar with, but I think if you look at them, like their main feature, if we look at it from an Egyptian point of view, their main feature would be there is available land, there is space, there is like empty plots somehow. Usually these gardens are built along like railway lines and like somehow like inner city peripheries, as geographers usually call them. So places, unused places, and then later sometimes they are even turned into land that is being built up. So they also have actually a tenure issue sometimes. But anyways, I think these gardens cannot be easily transferred. The concept of these gardens cannot be easily transferred to Egypt, because simply the space for this is missing, is lacking, and therefore the idea of rooftop gardens, rooftop farms came up, because that is, especially in the informal settlements, that is the only spot left in the urban fabric. So you want to make use of that, yeah. And then also maybe I should mention, we looked at this from a climate change adaptation point of view. We haven't actually discussing this very much this evening, although this is under the umbrella of the Cairo Climate Talks, but like we wanted to first of all do something about the microclimate, like we were looking into the microclimatic effects, and also having some additional food, or the more like the expert term would be food security. Yeah, so this was the main motivation behind our project, to have climate change adaptation, and we look into very different types of climate change adaptation. So urban agriculture is just one possible means of it. Yeah, it's not the only solution, and it's also not the only solution, of course, for potential food crises in the future.
Thank you, Carl. Now, I guess we go, it's not exactly for the $1 million question, but it's a very short question for all the panelists here. And then we try to wrap up the discussion. I think it's a rather controversial question, and I guess everybody is going to have a different idea. What are the main threats to growth of urban agriculture in Egypt? And I leave it open to discuss. Very quiet. Whoa.
Okay, I'll take the bullet again. So I think when I come to think about what could be the things that would stop the progress of urban agriculture, I don't see any let's say things that would hinder the growth, other than maybe some kind of policies when people are trying to, as you were explaining, maybe in Kenya, where it became all of a sudden illegal to have your own garden. Maybe someone could come up and say, okay, it's maybe dangerous to have a rooftop garden for structural issues on the roof. I don't know, but other than that, I think on the contrary, it's probably a growing trend. People are interested in this kind of thing. There's a growing interest. There's a growing awareness. So I don't really see any foreseeable threats, in my point of view, other than this idea of policy.
Actually, by my experience for this long time, actually we are Egyptian, and the Egyptian usually look for something and they try to make it, not to go to the scientific things or this is a problem. It happened with me in Damietta. I gave a seminar, and then in Masr Yom newspaper, in the front page, then the governor is stop all the roof gardens. He's actually catching the people doing this because they get soil and put it on the roof and by hose pipe and they irrigate it and then the roof is gone. And then they say this is a roof garden. It's actually, if you don't follow the right things, it will be a problem. You have to have training, and after that you can do it. But the problem usually we're on only looking. We don't. One other things there was the NFT system, the tubes, and there is one is paid about 35,000 Egyptian pounds. But unfortunately, he makes the collecting tank in the opposite, and then he trying to get the water to back, and they come to us, please come to repair what has happened. Actually, this is a problem and the main threat of roof garden. If the people is doing it wrong, and then usually the people is catching the wrong things. When I go to seminars, and then I discover one is raising hand, please, this is unsuccessful project. Why? Because someone have done this, and then if you do it right, no. Then you don't ask. This is there is a lot of people. I've seen it in Darb al-Ahmar. There was a lady. Actually, she's a professor. She's about 80 years old, and she produced a very nice crops. You know, which is actually for myself, I can't believe it can come. The turnip. The turnip is coming and bigger. It is a root crops, and then I discovered they produce it, and in this 10 centimeters. I can't believe it. That I said, this is a professor, you don't need us. The people, if they know the things right, they can create more things, we can't believe it. And the other things also, there was a lady, usually the lady is, she have a chocolate company, and usually they produce the chocolate powder in a polystyrene boxes. Because the lady is usually didn't throw anything, like the man, she have a huge amount of these boxes. And then it is take a lot of place in the factory. And when she came and studies it, and then she gets these boxes, put some water, and they cultivate it and sell it cultivated. Then she get to sell this and get a lot of money. This is one of the things they can kill it, but you have to know the right things. This is the source of.
You want to give a quick answer?
Yeah.
All right.
I also have some stories from the pilot project, of course, like minimal threats, like on the micro level. But this is obviously not what we are talking about. Like the major threats to urban agriculture from happening is, I think, if a compromise could not be found between the community needs, and there are different communities, so you have to actually look which need exactly. So between the community needs, the scientific results, like how much technology are we going to pump into this, and finally the authorities' regulations. Yeah, so we need to find a compromise between these three ends. In this triangle, I would say the urban agriculture project or initiative or movement can flourish. But again, my call would be for looking into the community needs and first of all, seeing if people want to invest in it. And if you give them some ideas, I mean, we have seen that, yes, they want to invest in it. It's not just money, it's also time, yeah? One of the big issues, like one of the threats we had in the beginning to our project was that people did not afford the time to come to the training. yeah? Because they're busy with other things. They are not waiting for urban agriculture. But once you convince them that this is something for their future and it's very healthy and environmentally friendly and it's even beautiful and the children enjoy it very much to be on the green roof, so then a process can start and is triggered, and then you can remove at least some of the threats that we were talking about.
I guess Emily would like to add something. Go ahead, please.
Well, first I want to say that we're not just talking about rooftop gardens. I think rooftop gardens are one iteration or strategy of urban agriculture, but Cairo is full of urban agriculture, and I think rooftop gardens are sort of a new thing. But I would say in the greater Cairo area that a lot of the produce is actually somehow urban agriculture because of the different challenges that are met with within the different for the different producers. But I think that the biggest challenge is the disappearing agricultural land, because as the city continues to grow out, and quite informally and formally, and there's a lot of different factors going on, but the building on agricultural land and the contamination of agricultural land and of soil is a huge threat, not only to urban agriculture, but to, I would say, national food security to a certain extent, because you're really, and we talk about climate and the different kind of pressures that are going to be put on countries like Egypt to produce in the future. I think that this is something that really does seriously need to be addressed. And again, coming to that question, when we talk about urban plans, how do we preserve these spaces? But preserve these spaces in a way that's meeting the social function of the communities, not necessarily the priorities of businesses and the priorities of or big corporations and the priorities of governments who don't necessarily use those resources.
Could we maybe, sorry, could you maybe argue that ignorance is the biggest threat from the people who provide or who get topsoil on high level and the house collapses, still the governor who stops everything without understanding? Could ignorance be the major threat to the development of urban agriculture? Because also I hear from you that there was a lot of skepticism in the beginning when those projects have been implemented. There is technological ignorance, there is policy ignorance, there is ignorance of the issue itself.
I mean, there was a lot of skepticism when the first railway was put on rails in Europe some 180 years ago. So it's not ignorance, it's just lack of information, awareness, and sometimes education. Yes, we all have an awareness-raising task with us to inform the public, the decision makers, and so on, the social initiatives about the benefits of urban agriculture. But it's not ignorance. I wouldn't call it ignorance.
Thank you very much. I guess we have wrapped it up. Any further comments from the panelists? Okay, thank you very much. You have one comment, please go ahead.
It is something funny. You know, I was giving a seminar in Bulak al-Dakhrur, and one of the municipality is coming, and then when we give idea about the roof garden, it was very, very early times, and then he said we are in unplanned areas, and then we have to make a police for roofs, because you are giving a chance for the people to grow drugs, as it was in the film. And then I look for the people, they disappeared. All the seminar is gone. This is only my one.
Maybe for me, to get out of the technological edge, it's also dangerous to fall from the roof, especially in combination with that. So as a father, I would say this is what I think is the main constraint.
Thank you very much. Thank you to the audience for coming and bearing with us the Q&As. I hope it was interesting. I would like to thank Laura for making it possible and the colleagues. And I wish you all a very good evening. Thank you.